If you self-sacrifice and put yourself through all kinds of nonsense and pain and suffering in the name of love, this episode is for you. You're listening to the Codependent Millennial Podcast with Sophie Shiloh, episode 51, Stop Self-Sacrificing and Calling It Love. Before we get started today, I want to implore you to come to a live workshop/class that I'm having tonight, December 20th, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. This class will be all about why you are self-sacrificing and calling it love and how to stop. On this episode today, I'll be answering some of the questions that people have sent me about this topic, but the real deep dive will happen tonight during this workshop. So whether or not you can come live, you should register anyways if this is a topic that interests you, since registering will also mean that you will receive the recording and all of my notes and resources after the class is over. Trust me, you want this. Go to my website to register. It's right there on the homepage. That's codependentmillennial.com, codependentmillennial.com. And you can email me at sophie@codependentmillennial.com as well if you have any questions. I won't be able to reply before class tonight, so just register, get a concise question together so that I can coach you live on the call, and I'll see you there. I cannot wait. I'm so excited. Now, for these questions that people sent me, let's get into it. Number one, why do people with codependency feel like they have to go through abuse the way that we do for love? Beautiful question, tragic question, heartbreaking question. Codependency can be defined in part as a chronic neglect of the self, stemming in part from a deep devaluing of the self. This can come from childhood experiences, lessons that you've learned along the way that would make you believe that devaluing yourself is the way to earn love, all kinds of different stuff. I mean, I could go on and on about this, and I kind of have. I mean, all of my episodes are essentially about what causes us to engage in codependent behaviors and habits. But really, you can self-assess here. You can look at patterns. What are you consistently putting up with that is hurting you? Why are you doing this? Where did you learn this kind of behavior? Where did you learn that this kind of treatment was okay? You might have been taught this directly, or it may have been less direct. You may have watched a loved one go through a really, codependent, unhealthy, dysfunctional, or abusive relationship. You may have experienced that growing up. The reasons why someone becomes codependent are varied. But you do need to understand, and you can answer this question for yourself. How were you taught that you need to endure abuse or mistreatment in order to earn love? What are you so afraid of that would cause you to choose this for yourself? What fears might be driving your decision to tolerate mistreatment or abuse in the pursuit of a semblance of love or connection or, belonging? It would really be helpful also to look at how those fears are irrational, not so that you can gaslight yourself, okay? Be clear about this. The point of assessing the rational qualities of these fears is not so that you can belittle yourself and make fun of yourself for having these fears. It's so that you can understand, okay, wow, I really am able to take a step back here and look at the fact that this fear I have is the reason why I keep tolerating this kind of behavior in my relationships, or this other fear that I have is the reason why I don't think that I deserve anything more than this kind of poor treatment, etc. And then ask the beautiful question, what might be more real than those fears? There are things that are more true than the fears that you have that cause you to self-sacrifice and call it love. Sound crazy? I get it. I understand how this might sound false and untrue and risky to even consider believing. But it's also risky for you to not consider this, because being miserable is a risk, it's risky to not consider that something else might be true, something else being, a belief system that would enable you to be more empowered in your relationships. You can choose what path you go down here. You can choose to not let go of the thoughts you have that are keeping you in an unhappy relationship, or you can consider letting go of the wall of the pool a little bit and swimming out and seeing, how warm the water is. Like, weird analogy, but I hope you're following me. Like, there is something more real out there than the fear that you have that is keeping you stuck in a miserable place. Okay? Great. Question number 2. Oh my gosh, this was right on time because I'm currently beefing with my boyfriend because I constantly put myself through suffering and neglect and mistreatment, quote, because I love him. Now I just had a long cry session in the shower listening to Beyonce because the day goes on. My question is, how do we get out of the cycle of thinking that self-suffering is love as recovering codependence? And how do we get over the guilty feeling of standing up for ourselves after enduring mistreatment? To give some background, I always feel like I have to constantly repeat myself when I talk to my partner about things happening in my life. It's always as if he isn't paying attention, and on occasion, he even admits that. So I was talking to him yesterday, and it reached its boiling point for me, and I shut down. Now we are not talking, and I feel bad that I stood up for myself, and I think a breakup is looming. Okay, neglect is real. You do deserve a partner who's interested in you, who's attentive and aware and present and invested. There might be other things going on here, and I don't have the full picture, but what I can address is your question about how to get over the guilt of standing up for yourself. What beliefs do you have about yourself that would make you feel guilty about voicing your unhappiness in a relationship? I'm taking a pause here. I know the person who asked this question, she's a client of mine. We've spoken at length about her family history, and so I have a little bit of context here. I know, my love, I know that you're listening, and I know that you're going to hear me when I say this. You know that you have beliefs that you adopted from your family of origin that would make you feel guilty and wrong for voicing your unhappiness in a relationship. And if you're not this client, if you're some other little weirdo listening to this podcast, hi, I love you. You're not alone, okay? Next question. What beliefs do you have about partnership and the role you're supposed to play in a relationship that would cause you to feel uneasiness about being dissatisfied or unhappy? It's a big one. It's a really, really big one. If you were taught your whole life that your role is to be a happy, chipper, bright-eyed, giving, unendingly happy wife, but you are feeling neglect, but you are feeling dissatisfaction, but you are feeling ignored, where is that going to leave you? It's going to leave you in a really painful position because you're being forced in that moment to choose between aligning yourself with this identity, this persona that you've been taught is your one mission in life, the happy wife. You're being forced to choose between that and an actual real happiness. It's a horrifying place to be. It's really hard. It's really painful. It's really scary. And I want you to honor that. You do have to choose. You do have to choose between, what's more important to you. Would you rather just keep fulfilling this outdated, weird, misogynist idea of who a woman ideally is in a relationship? Or would you rather start being loyal to yourself? Start being loyal to the values that you hold outside of what you were taught you were supposed to, have allegiance to. You do have to choose. And some of us choose to be allegiant and obedient to what quote unquote society wants us to be, perpetually happy in spite of all circumstances. And those of us who choose that end up unhappy. Okay. So be loyal to yourself. All right. The end. To address guilt. Guilt comes from thinking that you're doing something wrong or bad. Is being unhappy wrong or bad in your mind? Were you taught that being unhappy in your relationship isn't allowed or is indicative that you are somehow a bad person or a bad partner, a bad woman? Explore that. Okay, explore that. You don't need me to tell you anything more. You just need to spend some time with those questions. All will be illuminated for you. You will get a ton of clarity. You will answer your own questions. You will have revelations and epiphanies, and you will have done that on your own. That's you sitting down with a journal, sitting down with these questions, just getting honest. Okay, I love you. So, next question. I've been in a long on and off again relationship for almost 9 years. He claims my kids as his. He's been there since I had my youngest. My middle son is a daddy's boy majorly. My oldest son and him have had a rough past because of the way he has treated me. Okay, girl, let me just I need to interject here for a second in the middle of this question. If your son has an issue with this man because your son doesn't think that he treats you well, like, that's a big deal, right? Your son loves you. Okay. My ex lives in the next apartment building over from my 3 boys and I. I've become quite codependent. How can I break this cycle? I feel like I can't do anything on my own because he always swoops in and does things to help me, but then rubs it in my face when I'm down. Sounds like a gentleman. Okay. Sarcasm aside, sorry. I just feel like sometimes sarcasm works. I don't have a ton of context and details here, but let's address the most important part of this, which is where you need to reclaim your power instead of giving it away to someone outside of you. You said, I feel like I can't do anything on my own because he always swoops in and does things to help me, but then rubs it in my face when I'm down. Boundaries, darling, boundaries. He cannot help you if you don't accept the help, number 1. Number 2, what are we doing participating in a cycle that we know is dysfunctional time and time again? What are we doing putting ourselves in that position again and again and again? Does anyone remember that like early 2000s YouTube thing? There was like, I think it was just called Gay Best Friend. And it was this guy with this like pink neck scarf. And he was like, look at your life, look at your choices. And so that's what I'm saying to you right now. Look at your life, look at your choices. What are we doing putting ourselves in that position again and again and again? By now, you've had years to recognize these patterns that keep repeating themselves or that you keep repeating actively, choosing to. And you need to be able to look at the part that you're choosing to play in that. Sure, you can recognize the things that he does that you don't want to keep tolerating and putting up with. I think there's so much value in that, especially that you can identify like, oh, this is a red flag that in the future will mean that I don't continue a relationship with whomever. Like, oh, this is another indication that like that's behavior that I don't want to tolerate. But you can't change him or his behavior. So I'd recommend focusing on what you can control, which is your own decisions and actions. You break a cycle by no longer participating in it. You break a cycle by just stepping aside and letting the avalanche roll on without taking you down with it. What does this look like for you? You know the answers. They might scare you, but you definitely know what to do. Okay. Next question. Is there a healthy way to include the person who I was codependent with in my life? I've basically gone no contact with them. It feels wonderful to live my life, but I can't help but wonder. Why? What are we wondering about? Why would you want to? It feels wonderful to live my life. There's a period there. It feels wonderful to live my life, period. But I can't help but wonder, who cares? You're going to wonder about all kinds of stuff. I wonder what it would be like to swim under in one of those weird underwater caves where you're not supposed to swim and where people get trapped all the time. It's so scary, but I'm like fascinated by it. I'm never going there. You already made this decision to invite yourself on a beautiful life without this person. Don't reconsider. You were of sound mind when you decided to go no contact. Just leave it alone, okay? Great. Next question. How do you deal with this? Oh my God, you guys. Oh, if this energy that I'm bringing right now is a little much for you, just ride this ride with me, okay? I'm just so fired up and I'm teaching this class tonight and I'm like, I can't wait. Like, I'm giddy. I'm like laughing in the middle of answering these questions because I am giddy. I am so excited that you guys are asking these questions and I'm just beyond honored to be the one that you've thought to ask these questions to and receive an answer. Like, it's incredible. It's a huge honor for me. And I don't have patience for questions that you already know the answer to. I want you to still ask them, okay? Because community is important, vulnerability is really important. I asked all these same questions, so like no shade, no shame. I was right there with you for years and years and years and years. But like, I'm not gonna pretend to like get really introspective with you about questions that have obvious answers. Like, let's just not waste any time. Like if you're asking me a question that has a simple, straightforward answer that might sound a little harsh to hear, I'm not going to waste your time entertaining all the reasons why you sometimes at night feel like you miss this person. I don't care. That's not relevant. You missing this person means nothing about the validity of the decision that you already made to not speak to them anymore. Do you understand? Okay. And you know that I speak to you with all the love in the world. Like, if you're a listener of this podcast, if you've listened to any of my podcasts, you know that I'm coming from love. You know that this isn't in judgment. I'm just cutting to the chase because we don't have any more fucking time, okay? You don't have time to keep being miserable. Okay. How do you deal with this when it's your mom? Great. Your mom doesn't get a pass to be abusive towards you just because she's your mom, okay? You can put some boundaries in place in order to preserve your relationship with her, or you can take a break from interacting with her for a while. What beliefs about family do you have that make you think that your mom is allowed to be abusive towards you because she's your mom? What beliefs about family do you have that you would like to question because they don't seem to be contributing to you living a happy life? Just get curious, my loves. Get out your journal, see a therapist, ask yourself hard questions, and force yourself to answer them. You have a lot to learn by turning inwards. Great. Next question. So this is a 5-parter. This person wrote a lot. Well, 4 parts. I smushed it into 4 parts. She wrote a lot, and that's not a criticism. She wrote a lot, and they were beautiful questions. I was really excited that she wrote all of this because, I read it and I was like, oh, I know 800 other people who have these same questions. I'm so glad that you voiced these questions. I'm so glad that you were brave enough to write these out in text so that I could read them on this podcast and share them with the hundreds and, quite honestly, now thousands of people who are listening. Like, I think that's freaking beautiful and brave. So thank you. Okay. She said, on a recent Jay Shetty post, the interviewee mentions that we do tolerate and work through things differently based on the relationship. How do we get clear in those moments about how to navigate poor treatment when we are invested in the relationship? And if sacrifice is not part of love, what are the alternatives? How can we develop new concepts and practice them? How can we keep expanding that view over a lifetime if we never had that example for us? Oof, it's a tough one. My brain is wired to feel good giving and receiving with sacrifice, and I feel stuck trying to resist that, and then I feel more disconnected from myself. I don't know how to rewire those feel-good sensations and beliefs around love. You need to know your limits and what you will and won't tolerate. Define poor treatment for yourself and get specific with yourself about what is and is not acceptable to you. Navigating that will differ from relationship to relationship, but a basic question is just, what are the foundations of your various relationships? What does this person mean to you? What kind of grace do you want to extend to this person? And how can you do that without throwing yourself under the bus or without throwing yourself in the garbage can and sweeping all of your feelings under the rug to be ignored and stepped on? Like, you can extend grace to someone in a relationship without self-sacrificing. Isn't that funny? You can extend grace to a person in a relationship that you're invested in without martyring yourself, without completely denying the fact that you have, needs and wants and rights in that relationship that really matter just as much as the other person's feelings. What lengths are you willing to go to in order to preserve a relationship? And what are the roots of the poor treatment in the first place? That all matters. Like, the context really does matter. And I want you to notice here, I'm not giving you answers because I don't have any context for really the relationship that you're talking about. I'm not giving you answers here. I'm giving you questions that you have the answers to. Here are some more questions that you can start building, that you can use to start building a new relationship to love that doesn't include sacrifice and martyrdom. What was I taught about the relationship between love and sacrifice? What was I taught about the importance of sacrifice in love? Why do I think that sacrifice is necessary in order to earn love? Do I think that I could find love that doesn't require me to sacrifice important parts of myself? Do I think that I could respect and honor myself enough to wait for that or look for it or not settle for something less than that? Why or why not? What good things do I tell myself when I go through sacrifice for someone that I love? What result does that create for me in my relationships? Okay, wait, we have to pause. That's an important point. What good things do I tell myself about myself when I go through sacrifice for someone that I love? Do I earn self-approval based on the amount of pain that I put myself through in relationships? Like, please, please, please ask yourself this question. Please be honest with yourself. Do I give myself points and do I look for approval in the eyes of others when I tell them about how much I've sacrificed for this person that I care about? Like, really be conscious of this. And there's a difference here between like, oh, I visited someone in the hospital and I covered up a black eye. You know what I mean? There's a difference there. Then, of course, what result does that create for me in my relationships? Take ownership, please, of the results that you create in your own relationships because of what you are and are not willing to tolerate, okay? We don't have to abdicate responsibility to others all the time. What might I want to tell myself instead? You know, if I don't want to keep basing all of my self-worth and my confidence on my ability to endure pain, what might I want to do instead? What relationship do I want to have to sacrifice or to love? Imagine what might feel better. Just imagine what might feel better. Imagine what beliefs would allow me to have that kind of relationship. What does a happy person believe about sacrifice and about love? What do you think that answer is? All right, so the next part of her question, this is a 4-parter still. How do we process the pain of loving someone so deeply and being hurt by them? Sometimes that gets me very stuck because there's so much care that I have for them. It's hard for me to sit with that pain and not create stories around it, especially if I was treated well by them previously. So you know that you're creating stories, which is great. So let's just adjust the question a little bit. How do I become aware of the stories that I'm telling myself when I feel triggered? How do I take more control of the interpretations that I put on things that people say or do to me? How can I become more aware of how my past pain or triggers or wounds affect the way that I feel in certain situations today? How can I have sensitivity for myself without indulging in any painful stories that I might be attached to? You might be dealing with someone who's not treating you right. You also might be dealing with really painful thoughts that are being superimposed on a normal relationship conflict that isn't as deep as your thoughts are making it. I don't know. But again, you'll be able to get very clear on this and answer all of your own questions if you just sit with those. And then from there, you'll know what to do. Next part of this 4-parter. This is part 3. Part of why I have tolerated mistreatment is because of trying to deepen understanding of the other, especially if they have a very different culture than me. How do we take ownership in being empathetic, supportive, intimate, and connected while also drawing the line to say this is not okay with me and that requires my partner not to do X? So my question for you is, why is understanding someone more important to you than your own self-respect? What makes you think that understanding someone and also respecting yourself are mutually exclusive? AKA, what makes you think that those two things can't happen simultaneously? How could both things exist simultaneously? What insecurities are driving your decision-making here? What fears are driving your decision-making here? What beliefs do you have about staying in or ending a relationship that make you more likely to stay in something that feels painful in the name of being sensitive or connected or empathetic or whatever? What do you need to be very clear about so that you don't repeat the pattern of getting into relationships that do not suit you? Do you get attached too quickly and then find it very emotionally challenging to consider leaving even though you know you should? How are you perpetuating this pattern, and how can you take responsibility for making different decisions? Why are you so concerned with staying connected and sympathetic to someone who disrespects you? All right, part 4. How do we recognize abuse and mistreatment? For those of us who are so used to it, it can feel just normal or like we did something to deserve it. I feel stuck in trying to right those power dynamics I grew up with and all the gaslighting ingrained in my own self-talk. I want to take self-responsibility so that I can grow, but I often misplace too much on myself and I don't know how to correct for that. Oh, my love. Okay, so just huge hug. Like, I just wish I could hold your hands and look into your eyes and just, talk this through with you. You know what gaslighting feels like, clearly. So please stop choosing to do it to yourself. You know what it feels like. You can recognize when it's happening from others. You can also have the awareness to recognize when you're doing it to yourself. And you can choose to course correct in the middle, no matter how strong the sentence might seem in your mind, telling you that this other person is engaging in abusive behaviors towards you because you did something to deserve it. You are an adult. You know how to reorient yourself towards what you know to be true. You are responsible for what you tolerate. You are not responsible for how other people choose to treat you. You can never take responsibility for other people's decisions or actions or behavior, but you must always take full responsibility for your own decisions and actions and behavior. It sounds like you know that. Since that's the case, how do you think that you can change your self-talk and your understanding of responsibility in order to right those power dynamics? What have you taken responsibility for that you know now was not your responsibility and wasn't within your control at all? Like, how did people treat you growing up that you thought was your fault or that you thought you did something to deserve that you now know they did because of their own just dysfunction? You need to, this is, where some inner child work can come in handy. Like, if you know you need to rewrite your story of childhood, if you know that you got it way twisted and you need to straighten some things out for yourself, go do that. Do that. Take out your journal. What have you taken responsibility for that you know now was not your responsibility? It's a really good one. What have you blamed others for that you know now was your responsibility? For example, your own emotions or your behavior, your decisions. Sometimes we make decisions that really fuck ourselves over, but we try to alleviate the pain by telling ourselves that we made that decision because of someone else. That's not true. That's not true. To a certain extent, it's true, before you really wake up, before your eyes are open at all, before you know that you have agency. But as an adult, really, you're in charge of your decisions. You are responsible for your behavior. So, and this is great. Again, this isn't about shame. This is not about shaming yourself. This is about owning your agency. And only good can come from that if you do it the right way. Please don't use this as an opportunity to hate yourself and to shame yourself, okay? And the last question that I have for her is, how do you want to commit to behaving moving forward so that you are not gaslighting yourself anymore, even when others try to do that to you? Or even when those old voices in your head come up and try to tell you that you have done something to deserve mistreatment, or that if you would only change, this person would treat you differently. That's just, it's garbage. Listen to all of my podcasts, please. Get that garbage out of your brain. Ground yourself in the truth that you are not responsible for how other people choose to behave or treat you, period. Next question. Breakups are so hard for me. Oh my God, you're the most unique person in the universe. Just kidding. I love you. I told you guys, I'm so manic. I'm so excited for today. Breakups are so hard for me. Can you talk about how to leave a relationship when you're recovering from codependency? And can you talk about leaving not because of mistreatment, but because of sexual dissatisfaction? It feels so quote unquote mean and so hard for me. Thank you. Okay, no, thank you for the amazing question. You're a beautiful genius. Guilt. Again, let's talk about guilt. What beliefs are swirling around in your brain that are making you feel like you can't leave because of whatever reason? Whatever reason. And by the way, any reason is valid for you to leave a relationship. You can leave just because you feel like it. You can leave just because you want to. That's valid. So if you have anything more than that, that's also valid. Okay? What beliefs do you have about being mean that are causing you to consider choosing unhappiness over basic acknowledgement of the kind of partner that you want? Why isn't that enough for you? Look, I get it, okay? I fucking get it. Because I want to has never been an acceptable response for a woman to do anything ever. So I get it why you would not think that that's reason enough for you to leave this relationship. But it is, okay? It is. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it, just because you fucking feel like it, okay? So any of these narratives that tell you that you can't be mean, or that if you choose yourself over this partnership, that is mean and that being mean isn't okay, like all of it is nonsense, okay? It's nonsense. Most of you also, like, you all have a pretty sharp bullshit meter. I just think that it's a lot of times like really dusty and dirty and just hidden under a pile of like self-loathing and fear around being accepted by others. Tune it, get it in good working order again, dust it off. And if someone says something to you, or if your mind tries to tell you that, oh, you can't leave that relationship because that would be mean, just call bullshit, because that's insane. Like, it sounds like nonsense because it is nonsense. You're an adult. Do whatever the fuck you want, okay? Okay, next question. How do you heal or get over codependency? So I didn't plant this question in here. Someone literally texted this to me and I was like, LOL, perfect. So where do I even begin? Like, number one, keep listening to the podcast. Number two, okay, you need to understand where your problem stems from with codependency. There are lots of different symptoms of codependency. This could be a 4-hour discussion, but start with my free quiz. It's on my website. I think you just have to scroll down to the bottom of the homepage. You can also email me if you want me to send you the link directly. My email, again, is sophie@codependentmillennial.com. You know what? Let me also give you my number to text me. If you want to text me, you guys, for like codependency support, I am very active with texting. Just text me. My number is 216-279-4035. 216-279-4035. And it's really me. It's not like a bot or an employee. It's not like someone that I hired on the internet. Anyways, take the free quiz. It will help you pinpoint like which area of codependency you struggle the most with, and you can start from there to just move forward with little baby steps that I also give you on the quiz. But codependency is essentially a chronic neglect of the self. So what comes to mind for you when I mention that? Like, if I just tell you, if you say to me, how do I heal or get over my codependency? And I'm like, codependency is a chronic neglect of the self. Where are you chronically neglecting yourself? What comes to mind? What immediately are you like, oh, that's my thing? It's very likely that if you have like any level of self-awareness at all, that something came to mind and you're like, oh, definitely got to work on that. Or like, definitely been struggling with that since I was 4 years old or since I was 13, whatever. So a couple questions to just get you started, get the gears turning in your beautiful brain. Do you notice yourself relying on others for permission, love, approval, acceptance? Do you put yourself last in your relationships and your decisions because you're hoping that someone will come save you or tell you that you're worth more than that? Those are some of the most common things. And again, you'll know what question to ask next. It will become very clear to you where you're struggling the most with codependent symptoms and behaviors and habits, and you'll know how to move forward. You need to reflect and notice where you are engaging in codependent behavior, because there are very simple, very specific ways to address any of the classic codependency behaviors and habits. I talk about those in the quiz, like I said, but I also have a free codependency cheat sheet that gives you tons of details and specific steps to take no matter what symptoms that you're struggling with. You can find that cheat sheet at codependentmillennial.com/get cheat sheet, one word, get cheat sheet. That's GET CHEATSHEET, and it's free. Go get it, start working through it, let it change your life. Enjoy. All right, next question. How do I deal with my partner not understanding that I don't like him going to bikini bars? He just tells me that I should trust him enough to be confident that he only wants me. I am that, but I still don't like it. So she texted me that. I texted back, oh goodness, this is a whole conversation. Let's start here. What would you say to your sister if she asked you the same question? Or your best friend? Or your daughter? And she replied back, she would say, I would tell them to stand their ground if their partner is doing something they're not fond of. My partner apologized to me this morning about it, but now I'm questioning if he's doing this on his days off when I'm at work. Okay, he obviously is, but okay. So girl, like, okay, standing your ground. I'm like, where do I even begin? Oh my God. I just think of like, if you really understood the scale of like 8 billion people, like if you really understood how many billions of people there are on this planet, would you put up with absolute nonsense like that? Like, no, right? You just don't understand numbers. You don't understand numbers, and you're controlled by fear. That's why you're even considering tolerating this. Okay, so standing your ground doesn't always mean you have a conversation. Sometimes it just means that you do what you know you've got to do. No negotiation or conversation required. The relationship that you want does exist, and it sounds like you're not getting the respect that you desire. Don't pretend to be confused or baffled here. If you're scared of making a change, admit that to yourself. But please do not stay and tell yourself that it's because you're confused or because you can't leave or because what you want isn't out there. That's just not true. And those are all also terrible reasons to stay in a relationship that doesn't feel great. Like, you deserve to stay in a relationship that you would choose 1,000 million trillion times over. You don't deserve a relationship that feels like a last resort that you're kind of in just because it's there. So, like, what do you want? Do you... Oh my God. I'm not telling you to end your relationship. I'm just telling you that because it's there is a terrible reason to be in a relationship that doesn't feel good. Like, oh, it's just not great. Like, just treat yourself like you would want to treat your daughter, like someone you love the most in the world. Why do you have to be happy with anything less than what you know your daughter deserves? Why do you have to put up with anything less than what you know your best friend in the universe deserves? Like, why? Why? No. Okay. Next question. Why is it that I would rather stay somewhere that I don't want to be instead of having a difficult and scary conversation around leaving? He can feel I'm pulling away and is now trying to make up for years of neglect and abusive behaviors. It disgusts me, but I don't know how to leave. Okay, come on. You do know how to leave. How might you leave? There are, I don't know, a zillion ways. You could make a list as long as your arm. You know how to leave. This is me being, again, totally insensitive, totally just cutting to the chase. We don't have any more fucking time for you to sit around and be disgusted by this man's attempt at making up for years of neglect and abusive behaviors. What are we doing? And honestly, like, it's interesting to me that you're able to type out the words, it disgusts me, but I don't know how to leave. How can you write the words, I don't know how to leave, and honestly tell yourself that, and or even think that that's true? And again, I am not shaming or trying to be mean to you right now. I am trying to wake you up so that you understand, so that you can, your like metal detector needs to be more functional. And the metal detector doesn't detect metal, it detects bullshit from yourself. So when you hear yourself say something like, I don't know how to leave, immediately it starts beeping. Nonsense. What are you talking about? I don't know how to leave. Yeah, I do. I know how to send a text. I know how to say a conversation in to another person. If there's danger involved and there's real risk, I know how to make a plan. I know how to reach out to friends for help. I know how to save up money and make a real solid plan to leave. If there's risk there, I know how to contact the authorities that I need. Like, you know how to leave, okay? Like if a friend came to you and she was in a really, like, let's just say, God forbid, like a friend comes to you, she's in real dire straits, like it is bad, like her bodily safety is in danger. You would know how to help her leave, right? You know how to leave. It's just scary. And of course it is. Deal with it. Deal with it. You're an adult. Would you rather continue the pain that you've been tolerating instead of just doing this thing that feels scary? Are you aware of the invigoration and the exhilaration that is waiting for you when you choose to start respecting yourself with every decision you make, with every breath you take? You are afraid, and that's fine. That's amazing. That's literally what you are supposed to be feeling right now. I'm terrified. Okay, so now what? I'm so scared of leaving. Awesome. Now what? I'm so scared, and I know that I'm supposed to feel this way in the situation that I'm in. So now what am I going to do to move through this in spite of my fear? Don't gaslight yourself. Do not delude yourself. Do not lie to yourself. Just be a fucking badass and do what someone who has the highest amount of self-respect that you can imagine would do. Just do what someone would do who has the highest amount of self-respect that you can imagine. Just do that. Any emotions that come up during that process are normal human emotions that a normal human feels when they're doing what you're doing, when you're doing something terrifying, and they are not indications that you are making the wrong decision by doing what you know you need to do. Be accountable to yourself in your deepest moments of loneliness and pain in this relationship. That version of you, the you who has spent years in neglect and abuse, she needs you to boss the fuck up right now. No excuses, okay? Next question. Love does require some sacrifices because people cannot always agree on every single thing. So where is the line then? Does it stop at which restaurant to eat at, or can it go deeper, like them staying friends with someone you don't feel comfortable about and it just requires deeper trust from you? So I think you probably know the answer. I don't know. Like, do you have trust issues? Do you have jealousy issues that you need to address? I don't know. Do you trust this person and extend them grace and trust and freedom generally? Maybe. Okay. And you have an issue with someone specific from their past that they insist on keeping contact with for whatever reason? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that if you were fully honest with yourself here, that you would have a clear picture of the situation and that there wouldn't really be much confusion here. Confusion is almost always a way that we avoid making a decision that scares us. So, I mean, choose, like, just make a choice. What scares you more than the difficulty of the decision or the conversation that lies ahead? Does being with someone that you don't trust scare you? Does putting your own hand over your mouth for years scare you? Something to think about. I will just play devil's advocate for a minute. You know, if it is true that you have jealousy and trust issues, if this has come up for you before, if people that you trust have told you this before, if you have like a little inkling somewhere in you that says, I think I might be the problem here. Okay, great. Like maybe that's something to address in therapy, alone with, in therapy with your spouse or your partner. But I doubt that's the case. All right, next question. How do you handle relationships that you would have completely cut off, but you need to communicate with them in regards to co-parenting? Great question. And another really common one, I chose this question to include in this huge list because I get this constantly. The answer is boundaries, structure, and legal support when necessary. Never involve the kids in doing the communicating ever. That's not okay. This isn't a conversation. It's not like, well, I just asked them. No, don't involve the fucking kids, okay? You can communicate during set hours using specific mediums rather than calling at all times or, reaching out in a million different ways. You can structure a communication agreement with your mediator or your lawyers. You can trust yourself to know what you can and cannot handle or allow, and you can trust yourself to know how to navigate that. You must trust yourself. Man, when you don't trust yourself, you can choose not to trust yourself if you want, but that is an exhausting existence because then you got to ask all these questions to everyone else, and everyone else knows better than you do about your own life, and that's not true. If and when the other person violates your agreement about communication and everything around that, you can remind yourself that you can not control their behavior. You can only control yours. And then you can act accordingly. Block them when you need to, even for an hour at a time. You don't have to answer every question. Communicate exclusively about the kids and their care and nothing else. You can do this. You can do this. Next question. Oh, damn, I just left a severely abusive relationship. He hovers too. When they abuse you, hover and then come back with grand apologies and everything in you wants them to. How do you say no? She also asked, how real is narcissism? How legit is narcissistic abuse? What boundaries do you uphold when you're with an addict knowing that addiction has no handbook? How do we heal this in ourselves? There is a program that I just started called Al-Anon for friends and family of addicts. Okay. You know how to say no. You just do. You just say no. You've made your decision and it's not up for negotiation or revisiting or reconsideration. It's just done. Simple, not complicated. Any emotions that come up around this are not indications that you've made the wrong choice and should reconsider. Okay? I understand that everything in you wants them to come back and like ask you back but please just wake up, like be an adult, right? It's that simple. It's like, all right, is part of me wanting this to like end up like a weird Disney fairy tale thing? Or do I just need to snap back to reality and remind myself of all of the abuse, of all of the mistreatment? Do I need to just wake the fuck up and be an adult? And that's really the case. You just need to wake up and be an adult, okay? You know how to say no. Just keep saying no, and don't interpret any challenging emotions as signs that you should reconsider, because they're not signs. They're just emotions, okay? Narcissism is real, as is narcissistic abuse. It is deeply misunderstood because everyone on Instagram thinks that they're a mental health professional, so it's often applied to situations that aren't actually abusive or narcissistic at all, but it is real regardless of how it's being used as a blanket explanation these days. Addiction does actually have a handbook sometimes, like it absolutely does. For example, the 12 steps, which you're learning about in Al-Anon, are incredibly effective and change people's lives every day. The life coach school, that's where I got certified, that also has a very effective program on reducing or eliminating substance consumption, which I studied during my certification there. And, you know, tons of people have used that to stop drinking, to stop using. Like addiction absolutely, in many cases, does have a handbook, okay? Depending on your situation, it might not be a great idea for you to choose to be in relationships with addicts, even when they are deep in their healing process and very committed to it. I will always stand by that. Like, if you're a codependent, you should stay away from addicts, okay? There are so many issues. There are so, like, just why? It can really be a helpful tool for some people to just have a hard boundary. It's not that you judge addicts. It's just that you know, you can just say to yourself, look, I know that I have severe issues with codependency. And I know that what's best for me is to not entertain relationships with people who have histories of addiction for all kinds of different reasons. And that can just be a boundary that you hold. And any weird, issues and self-judgment that come up around like, well, I'm like really being judgmental, or that's really mean, or I can't just like dismiss someone just because of their addiction. Like, I should look past that. I mean, fine, but also like how many times do you want to hurt yourself before you just allow yourself to do what you know you need to do to take care of yourself? Like, this is a much larger conversation. Anyways, I can't tell you what boundaries you need to have in place, but I can tell you that if you're asking me that question, that it is likely that you already know a few boundaries that you're wanting permission to put in place. And great, there you go. You have my permission. Like, give yourself that permission. Like, what are you fucking waiting for? What are those boundaries? Where do you find yourself trying to control your partner's behavior, especially in regards to their addiction? Get clear, get curious with yourself. Do not gaslight yourself, and make decisions accordingly. You are going to have to adjust the way that you've been perceiving your partnership with this person. It sounds like one-on-one therapy or coaching would be helpful for you on top of those group Al-Anon meetings. Last question, my loves. I hope this has been helpful for you and useful. I really genuinely do. So last question, do you believe the statement, quote, relationships are about sacrifice? What part do you think sacrifice plays in a healthy relationship? How does sacrifice differ from consideration or compromise in relationships? This is in the context of my partner saying that relationships are about sacrifice, which freaked me out, and I've been extremely detached ever since. It sounds like a death sentence, LOL, and I feel like he's waiting for me to be quote unquote ready or quote unquote mature enough to be that willing to sacrifice. Okay. This question is so perfect. It's like the epitome of everything that we're talking about. Like, waiting to be ready or mature enough to be that willing to sacrifice. Like, that just reeks to me of like someone just testing you to see how much pain you're willing to endure or how poorly they can treat you in order for you to like earn their perception of you as a worthy partner. And like, do you want to be playing that game? Why? Why play that game when every other game is available to you? Why have a race to the goddamn bottom when you could just, boop, like walk over there and find someone who's fucking normal? Why? Oh my God. Okay. So that statement sounds depressing as hell. Why would you choose to hold on to a belief about relationships that sounds like a death sentence, my darling? You need to get a clearer understanding of what he meant when he said that and what you made it mean that caused you to go into flight mode. Like, I don't know what he meant. I have no idea. I wasn't there for the conversation. I don't know this dude at all. He might have like meant it in like a really creepy, scary, weird way, but he might have also just been like, look, if we both get fucking cancer when we're 75, like, can we die in each other's arms? Like, I don't know what he fucking meant, okay? Are you scared that you won't have the strength to leave if things get unbearable and you know you need to leave? Are you afraid that he'll abuse your commitment to him and to the relationship? Are you afraid that you don't have a solid foundation of self-respect and therefore will tolerate whatever you're given rather than just knowing what it is that you want and deserve and not settling for anything less? Are you already feeling taken advantage of in this relationship and you don't want it to go any further? Are you afraid of a slippery slope? Like, are you afraid that once you make one accommodation that you'll just be a doormat and that you'll put up with absolutely anything no matter how bad it gets? Again, get curious, get out a journal, ask yourself these questions, and force yourself to answer them. And it's very likely that you'll know how to move forward from there. All right, my darlings, that brings this episode to a close. Those were some of the questions that I received around how to stop self-sacrificing and calling it love. I hope that was helpful for you. I hope it was useful. If you know that you need to do some work around this, I highly recommend coming to our class. It is tonight, Tuesday, December 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can register by visiting my website at codependentmillennial.com. You can also email me with any questions, sophie@codependentmillennial.com. You can find me on Instagram @codependentmillennial. And I look forward to seeing you tonight. The class will be recorded, and if you register, you will receive the recording. So if you cannot make it live, register anyways, and I'll send out the recording, the notes, and all of the other resources that I'll include afterwards. I hope you have a beautiful night. You deserve so much more than you think you do because your codependency lied to you and made you think that you just have to take what you can get. And that's not true. Okay? Love you. Have a good night. Talk to you soon.